Hi there, this is Ric Hansen on Amazing Greats with our guest, Ted Greenfield, commercial airline pilot and invisible angel.
From the heart to the mic, on the field, on the stage, faith in they step as they turn the next page. Athletes, actors, musicians, authors, and more, sparking the flame, lifting up Jesus unashamed of his name. Life stories of struggle, redemption, and grace. Victories rising from a broken place. Legends of life with a purpose to show how God shows up when you let him flow. Amazing grace, shining bright, living the faith in the spotlight. Hearts on fire, now let it go. Turn it up, it's time to start the show.
There we go. Airspeed is alive. Power is set. Nice and smooth. Good. 50, 60, 65, 70. And there we go.
We are talking today with Ted Greenfield, who, Ted, this is just a great opportunity to deep dive into who you are and what you do. But for our listeners who probably are not particularly aware, I'm going to tell you that you come from, in this place in your life, from a variety of skills that you've developed over the years, including, as I understand, you were a special education teacher, you were an improv comedian, you were a television producer at one point, you worked with the FAA and multimedia, had your own safety and training course online, and that all brings you to who you are today. And God had a way of weaving all of those little gifts together to
Yes.
come up with what we're doing today. So it's invisible angels is what we're talking about today, and that is the crux of the whole thing. Plus, we want to talk about your book as well.
Yeah.
God is in this fight. But let's first of all tell me tell our listeners what is invisible angels.
Invisible, first, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me. Invisible Angels is a direct air carrier that provides air transportation for human trafficking survivors. And we work with law enforcement and rescue organizations across the country, pretty much mainly in the Southeast, though. So what the typical scenario is that when we get a call from a rescue organization or law enforcement where a human trafficking survivor needs to be transported from A to B, whether that's to medical help or whether that's to a safe house or whether that's for family reunification, or even we were talking with Homeland Security just recently, scheduling a trip for a survivor to make a victim impact statement at her trafficker sentencing, which is very important. So we provide air transportation completely for free to human traffickers, human trafficking survivors, excuse me.
Yeah.
And we work with rescue organizations, and we always travel with a victim advocate, and that's the short story of what we do.
And when you started, you knew almost nothing about what the impact of what sex trafficking and trafficking in general was all about.
I knew less than nothing, and it's really one of those stories where, as every Christian, we all have one question, whether we're brand new in the faith, we're in the middle of our middle age, we'll call it, or we're kind of, we're further down the road. What is God's will for my life? And that's every single and that comes and goes in seasons, and it changes. So back in 2018, I was in a Bible study up in Maryland, where I was living at the time. And I was working at the FAA, and I was a pilot at the time. And this woman comes to talk to our Bible study about human trafficking in the Baltimore and Washington, D.C. area. Now, I knew human trafficking was a thing in Cambodia and Vietnam and other places, but I didn't think it was happening here, to Americans. I had no idea. So the woman comes in and very nice, speaks to us. There's about 10, 12 of us in the room, and she starts her presentation, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, she's got to be making this up. And the crazy thought ran through my mind, we have Home Depot here. This can't be happening. I mean, we have, it was just kind of like, I've lived overseas. I've lived in West Africa, lived in the Dominican Republic, lived in Southern Asia and Europe as well. And we have such a high standard of living here. I thought human trafficking can't be happening here. And after about 10 minutes, I wasn't believing her. And then she had said something. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's telling the truth. I remember sitting there just leaning back in that study that night, and this hit me in my chest like a wet bag of cement. It was just like, oh my gosh. And I was like, then I was started hanging on every word, and I started thinking, I want to do something. I want to, and at first I thought, when I was driving home that night, I thought, well, maybe I can make some videos. I'm a multimedia producer. Maybe I can help with kind of, some kind of graphics or something. And then, typical man, oh wait, I'm a pilot. Maybe we can use the aviation thing. I started looking around online, just kind of snooping around online and looking at different human trafficking rescue agencies. And I found a sermon on YouTube by a guy by the name of Lee Dominique, who runs an organization called Trafficking Hope out of Birmingham, Alabama. And he was giving a sermon through Hope City Church, and he was just telling his story on how he got involved in the human trafficking rescue space. And he had made a lot of money in fast food restaurants, and he found an interest in this and really found a calling in it. And he built two organizations, one called Trafficking Hope and the other called the Well House, I believe. And so I was really just hanging on every word of his YouTube sermon. And that was a Sunday, I believe. And the next Monday, the next day, I called Trafficking Hope. And I thought, hey, maybe they can use private aircraft to help out. So I called, and the director answered the phone, and I said, hey, I saw this YouTube presentation yesterday, and I'm a crazy Christian guy with an idea. If you think I'm nuts, hang up the phone. You'll never hear from me again. But if it has some teeth to it, then let's keep on talking. And she laughed, and I said, hey, do you guys ever need private aircraft to transport survivors from either the point of rescue or moving them around, or just to transport survivors? You guys ever need private aircraft to do that? And I thought she dropped the phone. And she was like, oh my gosh, Ted, this is an answer to prayer. And for the next 45 minutes, she told me of all these horror stories about these trafficking survivors being rescued from hospitals, from prisons, from off the street. And they can't get them to safe houses because they have no ID, they have no money, they have no family, they have no clothes. They are literally picked up right off the street. And and she said, we're driving these people 10, 12, 16 hours to different safe houses across the country. Yes, we really need this. So then for the next 45 minutes, what seemed like 45 minutes, probably wasn't, but it turned into a prophetic prayer call where she just prophesied over me that I would be running an organization, rescuing hundreds, if not thousands, of trafficking survivors, and having a fleet of aircraft, and operating this organization. And it just turned into this massive prophetic prayer call. And I was actually in a government FAA building at the time. And I'm walking up and down the hall with the phone in my hand and my hand in the air, and I'm just, and I'm just praising God. And because the Holy Spirit really kind of, just jumped on me at that point. And I got to tell you, I have never felt that calling before. It was just, it kind of one of these things.
Yeah. So before we jump too far away, the other thing that I wanted you to bring up, because it was in the book and it shocked me and it shocked you at the time, and that is that the trafficking happens not necessarily by criminals who are finding these folks. It's families and friends, and that to me says a whole new chapter of horror.
And that's the reality of the trafficking scenario. That I've encountered, and everybody in this, in the trafficking and rescue space in this country has encountered, is that most of the trafficking survivors are trafficked by someone they know. Many of the people we've given transportation to have been trafficked by family members, by mothers selling their kids to a gang just because they need drugs and rent money. And I'm not making this up. When I first heard it, I'm like, this can't be happening. We did a flight with Homeland Security, and we got a call from them, and they said, hey, this is how the call went. The agent picked up the phone and said, hey, are you Ted Greenfield from Invisible Angels? And I said, yes. Yeah, we heard about you at this conference. The teacher and the father will never see the light of day again. We have a young child under the age of 10. We have an agent waiting with him where he was. We have to get the boy back to his mother, and we can't do it. Can you help? And I said, absolutely. And it turns out I guess the father had kidnapped him and put him into a child pornography ring.
Oh my God.
And we had him home by lunchtime the next day. Um,
Fantastic.
and that's the thing. The government can't move that fast. Homeland Security is not in the transportation business. And a private organization, like ours, and there's a couple others out there as well. We can move on a dime and take care of that and not charge. So they don't have to worry about anything like that, which
Yeah.
is,
So
which is great. And so it was, and that, that kind of jumped ahead that story, but that's the reality of trafficking, in this country, and I'm sure in other countries too. It's absolutely horrifying. And just in my brief time, what I've seen is awful. But again, most of the people being trafficked are trafficked by someone that they know. And also, our youngest person was 8 years old. Our oldest was 48 years old. It runs the gamut. I
wow.
mean,
Wow.
and they're all, hey, people say, are these people from El Salvador? Are these foreigners? These are all American people, all American
Wow.
kids.
Okay, let's jump back. The prophetic vision that we had.
Yeah.
So it was a vision, but you had no airplane at that point. You had no permits. You had nothing.
I
But it all
had
started
nothing.
with a domain name
Yes. So the
for a
domain
website.
story. Yeah, so I after I got off the phone with the director, I remember hanging up and I just said, "All right, Lord, how's this going to happen? Because I can't do any of this. I mean, I knew it was going to happen. I didn't know how, and I was on cloud nine. I was just like, yeah. This is fantastic. Everything, and I'll tell this story, but let me proceed this by saying everything happened in 9 month periods of revelation. It was progressive revelation. And I didn't understand the 9 months until a year and a half later. I'm like, hey, everything's happened in 9 month periods, which is a birthing period.
Yeah.
So, um, so anyway, nothing happened after that phone call. I started calling other places, and there were a couple other aviation organizations that just couldn't make it work for whatever reason. And I just started calling them, and I met a lot of great people over the phone. And so 9 months went by, and it seems that nothing was happening. Then I'm in a big FAA meeting up in Washington, D.C., and there were about 40 people in the room, and it was one of these big safety meetings and kind of boring. Um, but I hear God in the middle of the meeting, I hear him say, invisible angels. And right away, I'm like, oh, Lord, that domain name is going to be $3,500. You want me to buy that domain name? It's going to be $3,500. I don't have $3,500. I mean, right away, I went into the argument. I can't forget about it. And there's a couple people in the Bible that did the same thing. So, and then I heard him say invisibleangels.org. And I'm like, I knew it. Lord, that domain name is going to be $3,500. I'm a multimedia producer. I'm a web developer. You know this. And then I hear him say, go buy the domain name invisibleangels.org right now. So very politely and quietly, I closed my laptop, snuck my way out of the meeting, and I'm walking down the hall to my office. And I'm like, Lord, that's going to be $3,500. You just watch. And I get in my office and I open up my register.com account. I enter in invisibleangels.org, and it pops up and it says available $35. I mean, I was just like, I'm sorry, sir. And
A God surprise. Yeah, for
oh
sure.
my gosh.
Wow.
So I click purchase. I bought it instantaneously. And the moment I clicked purchase, God told me two things. He said, number one, speak life into this organization as if it's up and running. And number two, write a budget. And I was just like, I'm not questioning you again, sir. It's just so I was like, okay. So and a lot of people say, how do you know God's speaking to you? Is it words? What it was, it's like a footprint in my mind of a thought that is not mine. It was all the words all at once in one complete sentence, but it was just like downloaded. It wasn't words like coming across a ticker tape on the bottom of a news show or something. It was everything all at once, and it was just a thought that wasn't mine.
Interesting.
And it
Yeah.
all came at once.
So
So
many
that's
people,
how,
so many people wonder about that.
yeah.
God speaks to you.
And
How does he
that's,
speak to you? Exactly.
yeah. And that's it. And that's the way it's always been. I've heard God's voice audibly once in my life. And that's another story. It's a really cool story, but we'll get to that later if we want. So then God said, speak life into it, write a budget. So that's all I did for 9 months. And I mean, and during this time, it got really chaotic. And this, a lot of people can identify with this too, is when God calls you, and this is kind of history looking backwards for me now, experience rather, is that things get really chaotic when this happens. So during this time, my dad died, and he was 90, and and he wasn't sick or anything. He was driving and dating the day before he died, so he was he was in great shape, but it was still such a loss. And then COVID happened. I had sold my house up in Maryland and I had moved down to Florida. And then work went completely telework. So there was a lot of stressors going on, so there's a lot of stuff going on, and it was just kind of chaotic. So I'm telling everybody in all these online Bible studies that I was in during COVID that the vision of invisible angels, and I'm just like, it's a human trafficking ministry, and it's going to have airplanes, and we're going to provide transportation to people, and this is what it's going to be like. And I'm just talking, and I'm just anybody who would listen. I'm just speaking life into it as if it's up and running. I'm in this Bible study in Florida down here, and I was telling everybody about it. And there was a retired airline pilot, Bob, and Bob said, hey, the perfect plane for you is a Cessna P210. It's pressurized, it's 6-passenger, it's got a low fuel cost. You don't need to be type rated in it, and they're relatively cheap. And after that Bible study, I got online at totradeaplane.com and I looked at them, and sure, they're about $250,000 to $500,000, which is cheap for an airplane. And I was like, looking at the specs and everything, I'm like, wow, that is the perfect plane. 9 months go by. Nothing kind of happens. And I'm just writing my budget, and that's turning into more of a brochure, if anything, but it's something I can email out. And I'm just telling everybody like it's up and running and everything. And I'm sure a lot of people thought I was crazy, but they certainly heard the vision from God, So 9 months later, I'm back up in DC for a meeting, and it was a Sunday, and I caught this sermon by Stephen Furtick from Elevation Church. And the sermon was When God Gives You the Green Light. And when he was delivering that sermon, I was like, it's time. It was like, it's time. That's all I kept on feeling was it's time. And I'm like, but I don't know time for what, you just kind of launching pad to nowhere. Right? It's like, what's going to happen? And after the sermon, I literally felt I was walking around my, my condo up there, kind of looking under the pillows for blessings. I was just like, what is that? God, you're doing something. And a couple hours later, I chill out and I just get on tradeaplane.com, because that's what pilots do when there's nothing to do. We look at airplanes. And the first ad that pops up was a Cessna P210, just like Bob had prophesied 9 months earlier. And all the ad said was, I want to donate this to a nonprofit.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So I was just so stunned. I remember looking at it. I'm like, I just stared at it, and then there's no phone number or anything, so you have to email. So then I shut the computer down and then rebooted it and just see if it was still there. Maybe I'm just dreaming the whole thing, and sure enough, it was still there. And so I email the ad. And the next day he calls a guy by the name of Bill Strong, an older guy who just, he's just decided to give up flying. His health gave out. And I don't know what I said when he called. I was just like, oh, human trafficking, Jesus, God, human trafficking vision. I was just wasn't making any sense, and it's like going 2 million miles an hour. And I remember him saying, son, slow down. I want you to have the airplane. And that was it. So I said,
wow.
I said, okay, I have nothing set up. All I have is a URL, and I didn't even build a website yet. And he goes, all right, go get yourself a nonprofit set up, son. Get on LegalZoom, get all that stuff taken care of, put some money in a bank account. You call me when it's all done. Come get the airplane. So I got on LegalZoom, and I set up a nonprofit in about 3 hours. I put $100 in a business bank account, and then I quickly did a website. I'm a web guy, so I put one together that looked decent, and then I called him about like 4 or 5 days later, and I said, "All right, Bill, I got everything set up." He goes, "Come on out and get the airplane." I flew out to Kansas City and we met, and he signed the airplane over to us. And then he had a friend deliver it back out to Florida. And that is the short story
Wow.
of how we got our aircraft.
He
And we
didn't. He
did our
didn't.
first
He
trip
didn't
in
check on how
2021.
much money you did have in the bank when you went down there. He said the $100 was
I
probably not very
told him.
impressive. You told
I
him.
told him. But I will tell you what I did is that, because I thought, here's this guy giving an airplane to a complete stranger. So I put, and this, I don't think I told too many people about this. I put a personal portfolio together for him, and I included the last 10 years of my tax returns, my passport, my driver's license, my resume. I could look into, I mean, I stacked it with everything that I could, my government clearance work and everything, just so he's not giving it to some guy who's gonna whatever
Yeah,
is gonna
yeah.
sell it and pocket the money or
You
something.
had no secrets.
And yeah, so and I just really wanted to be completely transparent and say, look, this is for real, and I knew he was a believer, but we didn't talk that much about God. And he hadn't used the plane in a while. I went to see it, and it was perfect. It was, it was old, but it was, in perfect shape. And we did our first trip in 2021.
Wow. Is Bill still around, or did he
Yeah,
pass?
he's still around. I haven't talked to him in a while. I should check actually, just
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he was in his mid 80s back then. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but I did talk to his accountant a while ago, just because the way they donated the airplane to the nonprofit, we had to complete some paperwork on that, and
Yeah.
that helped out. But I think I talked to him a little while ago, but
So
about a year and a half ago.
the book is called God is in This Fight, as I'm showing you right here. I got a preview copy of it. It's not actually, it'll be available by the time the podcast airs. So anybody
Okay.
who's interested can jump on and grab it. But I got an advance copy. Thank you. And, I was just as a reader, I was really blown away about how I got engaged in your story, all of the ups and
Mm.
downs, the roller coaster ride that you went on through, multiple miracles that happened along the way. And it was so nicely written that I felt like I was on board with whatever was
Thank
going
you.
on. So, yeah, it was really
Thank
a
you.
nice job of putting it all together. And of course, we want people to read the book, so we're not going to tell every little detail, but there's so many interesting and involved stories. But there are significant moments in the journey where it looked like you were at a dead end. It looked like, oh, this is kind of where it all ends. Can you run through a couple of those?
Yes. So, um, after we provided back to that Homeland Security rescue with the young child, so we completed that flight, and then at work, I was telling people about it at the FAA, and they said, "Well, this is really fantastic. We really want to run a story on it." The internal public relations people said, "We really want to run a story to show, hey, our employees are doing awesome things." So they did a story on invisible angels, and they went, they published it, and it was a very nice story, and it went out, and there's about 50,000 FAA employees worldwide. It's a big organization, and so it went out to everybody, right? And I was like, cool, maybe we'll get some donations, whatever, God, you have it. And I just gave it all to God. 3 days later, I get a call from the Washington, D.C. Flight Services Directorate Office. And that's like getting a call from the IRS.
Mm.
And they're never good, and I'm an optimistic guy. So I see this thing on my phone and it says Washington, D.C. FISDO. And I'm like, well, maybe they're calling to congratulate me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's like, if it's going to be, you got a choice whether you're going to think it's bad or good, you might as well think it's good. So I pick up the phone, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Greenfield, hey, we saw the story, and, you're doing very commendable work, but tell me, how are you doing these flights?" And I said, "We're doing it under Part 91 FAR, Federal Aviation Regulations, Part 91 charitable flights," which I truly thought we were doing, which, I thought that was okay. And they said, well, Mr. Greenfield, actually, you're not. You're operating an illegal airline. You're violating, and they started naming all the regulations I was violating. And they said, we're opening a compliance action against you. That is very serious.
Hmm.
So at this point, I'm looking at in the span of about 90 seconds, I'm looking at $1.4 million in fines. They can take away my pilot's license. They can take away the airplane. And where do I work? At the same organization. So I've got mud on my face. I have a great reputation there. And I'm like, and they were like, we'll send you a hearing date. Goodbye. Click. Right. That was, typical kind of government guys.
Oh boy.
And I know how they operate because I've been on the other side of that. Right. Um, so I just sat down in my chair and I said, Lord, what are you doing? I remember saying, I did exactly as you told me to do. What is going on? And he goes, 3 words, tell my story. Don't worry. Just tell my story. And I had that Philippians 4:7 peace come over me. And I was just like, I was just like, okay, just tell your story. Just tell your story. So, I and there's a lot. I'll skip through the details. There's a lot of details in the book and some very funny parts because I reached out to friends. I'm like, well, what's going on here? What do I do? And so we'll jump ahead to the hearing. And I get on the hearing. There's all these government people, and they're FAA, all safety inspectors, and they're very serious people, no senses of humor, and there's a bunch of them online, all in their little Zoom squares. The first question they ask me is, "So, Mr. Greenfield, we're here today." They go through, we're here for compliance action, ABC, blah 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 blah. And Mr. Greenfield, tell us how Invisible Angels got started. And I leaned back and I said, "Well, you guys believe in Jesus?" And they all,
Okay.
and they all froze, right? They're all just like, I mean, just like that. And then I just felt like a spiritual starting pistol just go bam, go. And I was like, I just told them every little miracle, the big miracles, everything from that Bible study. And I explained it for about 45 minutes. Maybe it was a little longer. And then I told him about the rescues that we did, the rescue flights that we did. I told him about the trafficking survivors that we got out of harm's way. I told him about their background stories. We had the 8-year-old who was abducted into a child pornography ring. We had an 18-year-old that was sold to a gang by her mother. We had some serious cases, and they were like, this is unbelievable. And they were just all fumbling with themselves. And they said, look, we're gonna get back to you. We're gonna come to the findings. We all need to talk. And I said, yeah. And I'm kind of thinking, yeah, I bet you need to talk, about Jesus. That's what you need to talk about. And the phone call ended, and then nothing for about 3 weeks. And I had to hire a lawyer, a very expensive lawyer at this time. And that's a whole nother story, because I ended up knowing the guy from a previous flight. And, we actually were friends, and he was one of the premier aviation attorneys in Florida. So that was really cool. But then about 3 weeks later, I get an email from the compliance group, and the FAA does nothing in 3 weeks. Compliance actions usually take about a year, maybe 2 years to wrap up. 3 weeks later, I get an email saying, here's your hearing date, which was the next day. Please be on it. And so I call my lawyer. We get on the hearing, and they said, Mr. Greenfield. And here I am. I'm thinking, and my lawyer actually said, this is a quick jury return. You're done. So I'm thinking, no more pilot, no more plane. It's all over, everything. And they said, Mr. Greenfield, you're really doing commendable work. We do truly believe this was an oversight on your part. We're dropping all the charges against you. And to continue to do this, you need to be a 135 direct air carrier. Now, a 135 direct air carrier, that takes about 4 years, about $500,000. You need to be invited to do that. You just don't do that. And they said, we're going to talk to the Tampa FSDO, and we're going to set some things up for you. And 18 months later, we were a direct air carrier. And that is unheard of, that the FAA could move that fast.
Wow.
And it wasn't the influence that I had of working there, because I was kind of a nobody. I wasn't in management or anything like that. But God had placed me in a position there where during the process, I can stay ahead of what needed to get done. And the documentation that needed to get done, was staggering. And the people who came out, just dropped out of the heavens to help us, was a miracle. There was what's called a compliance statement needed to get done. That was your first document. That's about 1,500 pages, and that tells the FAA how you're going to comply with every single Part 91, 121, and not 121, 91, and 119 and 135 regulation. And our compliance statement is like this. And that was the biggest document, and a company came and did that for us for free in 4 days using AI. Wow. And there were just a couple of changes to it. So we became a direct air carrier in 2024. We did a couple of flights that during the time we were shut down. We really shouldn't have done those, but they call it, kind of like 134 and a half. It's not really legal. But then our lawyer said, look, if anything happens, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So shut down your operations while you do that, which was the safest thing to do. And then during that time, I'm like, okay, Lord, what do we do? There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of things to do. But then one day, actually sitting right at this desk, I heard God say, go out to the mall and start talking to clothing stores about donating clothes to Invisible Angels. You're going to need them. So I was like, oh, okay. So I left work. It was like 10 or 11 o'clock. And I just got up and I went down to Tampa Outlet Premium Mall. And I started talking to stores. Hey, would you like to donate, your returned items, or do you have any clothes to donate to Invisible Angels? And I walked out of that mall that day with a huge box of brand new returned items from Lucky Brand and commitments from Brooks Brothers, Nautica, Lucky Brand. And now we have Calvin Klein, Brooks Brothers, Nautica, Lucky Brand, and Calvin Klein, and Tommy Hilfiger. And every 6 weeks or so, they donate brand new returned items to us. And then we use that, and we put backpacks together for our survivors that we give rescue flights to. And it's all brand new clothes that they don't have, all in their size. So we put a nice package together. Plus, we have a journal, a Bible, toiletries, and then, some brand new clothes. And then also we have, like, every month or 6 weeks, it's usually about 150 pounds of clothes. So then we fly it to different rescue agencies, and we just drop it off there, and it's beautiful stuff. I mean, we had a gym suits from Brooks Brothers. Yeah, it's just so God has really provided, and I was busy during that time. Plus, when you go through a walk in the desert, it's always fruitful.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like it.
And so were you holding down a regular day job too?
I was doing, yes, I was. I was at the FAA, holding a regular day job. So my days were pushing around 10, 12 hours. And, and I mean, I loved my job when I was there. I was a multimedia producer. I was making safety training for pilots and controllers. So I was, producing an e-learning program or a video or graphics. And, I still, even when I retired, I couldn't believe they paid me for what I was doing. I get to make videos and graphics and multimedia about airplanes and, and training stuff. So I didn't work there a day of my life,
Yeah. That's the way to be. So now I've been trying to count on my hands here how many miracles we just saw fly by us there. And there was a lot. I lost count. So we had a quick turnaround on the certification. We had an attorney who, I think in the book at least, I don't know if you mentioned it here, became a pro bono situation where he charged you nothing.
Well, there wasn't exactly nothing, but it was, I told him, I said, his name is Ed Page, and he's from Carlton Fields, and that's one of the top legal organizations in the country. He actually worked with Kenneth Starr way back in the Bill Clinton days, so he is, he's top flight, he's top notch. So, and it turns out, again, how God works. I had known Ed because I went flying with this guy, Ed, who I knew was a lawyer, and we just got along well. I made a couple of videos of his plane, and we went flying a few times, had lunch, but I didn't know he was Ed Page, the lawyer that was going to be referred to me by another friend. And he gets on the phone. He's like, Ted? And I'm like, Ed? And, he goes, you're in trouble. The first thing he said to me. And, he wasn't a believer. I don't know if he is now, but, his first question to me was, tell me how all this started. And I said, do you believe in Jesus? And, he's like, yes, like a Law and Order, answer. I said, Ed, I had about 5 grand in my savings account at that time. And I said, Ed, how am I going to pay for that? What's this going to cost? And he goes, well, he goes, Ted, my rate is $895 an hour. And I said, well, Ed, could you get this done in about 5 hours? Because I got 5 grand. That's all I got. And he goes, don't worry. Don't worry. We'll take care of you. I want to get you through this. You're doing a good thing. And when it was all over, I said, I'm just, oh my gosh, I'm going to owe $40,000 here. What do I do? And he goes, Ted, just send, pay a $5,000 bill online and we'll call it even. And I was just, that was great. And that came back to me in droves. It was, and that's the one thing where I just felt God saying, just pay the bill. Don't worry, we're going to take care of you. And during this time, my personal giving went up from 10 to 20%. And God told me, he said, I want you to start tithing 20%. And I was like, ooh, it's worked at 10, it's going to work at 20.
Yeah.
And that gave me so much financial peace during that time. And, I didn't have a financial issue at all during that season. And still I have the same financial peace right now.
Wow. Now let's go back. There's one chapter toward the beginning of the book that I earmarked that I wanted to just bring up because it's such an odd thing to be putting in a startup person's book, and that is called. The chapter was called "Do Nothing."
Yeah.
And so to me, that's just the opposite of what you probably should be doing. You should be out there running around and doing everything you possibly can. But you got the word from God said, do nothing.
Do nothing. And in fact, I'm going through a situation right now where God said, do nothing. My life verse is Exodus 14, verses 13 and 14. And I explain what happened to me in the book. And in the book, I go back about 7-8 years, maybe 10 years, to a season of unemployment where I was really in the valley. And those valley seasons made so much sense now, but when I was going through them, they didn't. And I wanted to bring up one story that really made sense of do nothing, because in Exodus 14, verses 13 and 14, Moses says, these Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. I, the Lord, will fight your battles for you. You need only be still. Do nothing. So I was at the time, this is about 15 years ago, maybe 18 years ago now. I was working at a television network, and I had gotten into a disagreement of sorts with one of the executive producers of the television series I was working on. And I wasn't acting like an adult at all. We wrapped for the season, and it wasn't clear whether the show was going to be picked up for next season, but it was abundantly clear that they were going to let me go. Right. And we had gotten into, we just didn't get along well. And I acted like a child during the whole thing. After I was let go, she kind of came back around and rightly so. I think she wanted to leave a mark. And they came back at me over a very small, trivial copyright issue, because I had some of their television programs on my personal website as a demo reel. And I never got permission for it, because most producers just put their stuff up there. And well, that's technically not right. So they came back at me with a pretty heavy-handed lawyer, and he scared the life out of me. And I say it in the book. I was caught between a wall, a hard place, and the fangs of a corporate attorney sitting behind his human skull collection. And this guy scared me to death. In about 10 seconds, he had me scared to financial ruin, and they're talking about fines in the millions of dollars and everything. And, he did exactly what he set out to do. So I called a lawyer friend of mine, Byrne, and I had worked with Byrne at a startup years before. And I said, hey, he's an attorney. And I said, hey, I got this problem. And I told him what had happened. And he just said, stop. He's like, I know exactly what you did, And I'm like, and I'm like, all right, could you help me? He goes, all right, I'll take care of it. Just don't talk to anybody over there, and I'll call you back. Right. So he calls over there. I don't know what he said. And then I just heard God say, do nothing. Just do nothing. And a couple hours later, Byrne calls back and he said, "Hey, Ted, where's your production agreement?" And I said, "I never signed a production agreement with the network." He said, "Ah." And he smiled. He goes, "I'm going to call you right back." I mean, and I'm like, "Oh, what's going on?" He goes, "I'll tell you later. I'm going to call you back." So he calls me back in about an hour. And he said, "Well, Ted, it turns out that you never had a production agreement with on the shows that you worked on with the network, and they sold those television shows to Network A,
Mm.
Network B, Network C overseas. You're entitled to a portion of that sale." It was, you know,
Yeah.
and he said, "It's not going to be an easy case, but I'll take it. And we're talking about a lot of money here." And I just heard God say, "Let it go, let it go." And I said, "Byrne, I'm happy. Uh, this is over, right?" And he said, "Yeah, they don't have a case against you. You know, it's a done deal. If you want to drop it, it's probably the best thing to do. But I'll fight it for you. I'll go for it." I'm like, "Let's just drop it, Byrne." And poof, it all went away. And
Wow.
that's when Exodus 14:13, 14 became my life verse. And I've been living on that verse. So, jump ahead a few years before any of this happened. I was Christian worship. I was in Christian worship bands for years, and I was playing in a big Christian worship band up in Maryland. And I had just
You didn't
turned.
even tell me about I had
Oh
no idea
yeah, yeah. I
you're
was
also a musician on top of it all.
yes, yeah.
Oh,
I was in worship practice and I had just turned 50, and when that happens, that's a new season of life. And here I was, a special education teacher, I was a comedian, I was, and I've always had a lot of different, that's just how God wired me, so I've always been all over the place. And a musician and everything. So I I remember sitting and I just said during their corporate prayer time, I said, "God, I don't know what to do here. God, take this next season of my life. I I don't know what to do with it." Um, and I literally heard God saying, "Finally," because I just laid it down. And that is when things started to happen. That
mm.
is when I really felt the call. I wasn't even a pilot at that time. I had started my pilot's training, numerous times over the years, but I had never finished because it's very expensive. And that's when I was like, I'm going to finish this thing. I was on a family vacation down there, and that's when everything started to happen. And the less I do, even now, the less I do, the more things happen. And God tells me, he's like, "Do nothing." He is there to fight our battles for us. But also, if we get ahead of God, which we do all the time, we make a mess of things. And that's as true for the new believer as well for the seasoned believer with lots of gray hair. It's in our nature because we want to do something. And obviously I'm a doer. I mean, I like to be busy. If I'm not busy, it's not a good day. And um, that's really when do nothing, because do nothing became the mantra, because when you do nothing, you really see God work. And remember here, and this is interesting. I was having a moment a while back, just because I turned 62 last year, and and then you get, "Oh, I'm old. I'm old in 20 years. I'm going to be 82." Just kind of one of those things, right? And I got really upset, because it's like, "Oh, I've got more behind me than in front of me, and what am I going to do? And I'm going to be an old man, and 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 I just really got sad, and I heard God say, "I tell time what to do."
Oh man.
And I was like, "Lord, yeah, that's right. You do tell time what to do. Well, let's go then." I mean, let's go. Yeah. And and that really set the perspective for what he's doing. And 1,000 day, a 1,000 years and one day is the same to God. He lives outside of time, and we live inside of time, and it's very hard to wrap our heads around that. But when God says do nothing and watch him work, that's still the hardest thing to do. But boy, you know, uh, I got a whole book here
Yeah.
that I want to share those miracles with everybody, because God said, "Tell my story, just tell my story, tell my story." He kept on saying that over and over. And then I woke up one morning, and I'm not kidding. I woke up one morning with this finished picture in my head, this finished book cover in my head, exactly how it sits there, minus the picture, right? And Uh, and God said, write this. God said, write this book. And I started writing it.
Wow. Wow. This is just such an amazing, amazing story and so many lessons to be learned from your experiences. Um, Before we leave and have to say goodbye today, I want a couple of different things I want to talk about. One is I want you to share with us one of your, maybe the most gut-wrenching, tear-jerking rescue story so far in this journey.
Yeah. There's two. Um, but the it's in the first chapter. It's in the very first the very first story, the very first introduction chapter in the book. She was an older woman. And I, from what I hear, we don't keep in touch with them after after we take them where they need to go. But I do hear, from them because we work with the same victim advocates, frequently. And she's doing wonderful now, doing absolutely wonderful. But we dropped her off. We, flew her almost to the, way far up north in upstate New York. And it was a lot colder when we got there. So, we landed and the people from the safe house were there and they greeted us actually on the tarmac and they were walking away. And this is real subtle, but this really got me. And we chatted with her on the way up, but then she pretty much slept the whole flight up. But as they were leading her away, she stopped maybe about, 20, 30 feet, and she turned around and started walking back to me. And I thought maybe she had left something in the aircraft. And she just walked right up to me and she said, "Thank you for saving my life."
Hmm. Hmm. What what
You
what
know,
what better payoff is there than that, right?
yeah. I mean, just, and and the two other Nicole from Sail of Freedom heard it, and the other pilot who was with me at the time heard it, and that kind of set the tone here for what we're doing. And as a pilot, and as somebody who's laying the bricks of this whole thing, and and doing all the work getting it set up, and a lot of the heavy lifting, just the administrative stuff and everything, I when we're flying, I don't really think about that. Get them in the plane, get them comfortable, and chat with them maybe a little bit once we reach the cruising altitude, but not much. I've got a lot going on. And it's we're not flying a fully automated 737. We're flying a smaller aircraft, so I'm busy the whole time. That was one of those moments. And then the other was was that young child who was abducted into a child porn ring by his father.
Hmm.
um what goes wrong in a person's DNA where they do that?
Right. Yeah.
And there's been other cases like that. It is heart-wrenching. There was one woman, I guess she was riding during the whole ride from we're somewhere around Texas back to Florida, and she handed me a stack of papers as she left. And she said, "Here's my whole story. You have to understand something. 3 years ago, I was a normal suburban housewife with 3 kids."
Jeez, wow.
And she goes, "It's all right here." And I read the story, and then I called one of my friends at the FBI and I said, I've got to email something over to you. You got to, there's a new case here. And then we get into it. In December, a young girl in the foster care system was being trafficked by her foster care caseworker.
Hmm.
Her
This one
CPS,
person she was supposed to have trust in, and
yeah, and the foster care kids, they're easy targets because there's no family, there's nothing, and no one's going to believe them. And so what is off in someone's DNA where they do that to somebody?
Yeah.
And it's just, and I refer to it, it's Auschwitz level trauma to these human trafficking survivors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you had one of the other kind of crisis moments, and where you thought things might be all over, was your own health issues along the way, and that's not far behind you. I mean, that was fairly recent.
No, that's recent. So again, everything's fine, and This is spiritual attack 172, except it was a it was a heavy one. I go in for a normal physical, and they're like, "Hey, your blood work's bad. Come back for more tests." And I went back for more tests, and then I went back in. They said, "Hey, we need to talk to you." And I'm like, "Okay." And again, you don't think anything's the matter. And then she said, we need to send you to an oncologist. And right away, that's cancer. What are they looking for? And I'm like, what's
Yeah.
going on? Ted, don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. We're just doing this as a precaution. Turns out my platelets, my bone marrow stopped making platelets. And the numbers just went down, down. Your normal platelet levels are around 240 to 270, and mine were 29.
Oh
And
my
they thought I
God.
would just bleed out and die. But here's the thing. I had no symptoms. I had no bleeding. I had no bruising. I was feeling fine. I wasn't fatigued. I mean, there were absolutely no symptoms. And again, I'm like, God, what's going on? And then they're like, okay, they were like, we need to do a bone marrow biopsy. So they do a bone marrow biopsy, and I had this conversation with God one day in church, and I'm like, all right, Lord, if this is it, just don't drag it out. Just don't drag it out. I don't want to be, just make it quick. But I really want to see this ministry out, and whatever your purpose is, I don't want to meet you just yet. We have plenty of time for that. But I said, if this is it, just don't drag it out, please. I just don't want to do that to everybody around my life. And so I heard God say, just tell my story. Just tell my story. So I go in to get my bone marrow biopsy, and the intake nurse is there, and she's doing her intake nurse questions, and it's like 5 a.m. And so I told her what my birthday was, and then she just goes, and I said, what's that about? I was like, I'm the one going in and getting a hole drilled in my pelvis here. What's your problem? And she goes, I'm not that far behind you. And I said, young lady, and I leaned into her desk and I said, more has happened in the last 5 years of my life than any other period in my life. I kind of got mad, and I was like, I said, do you want to hear a story? Do you know Jesus? And she just kind of looked at me, and I told her the whole story of invisible angels. I said, look what God did with my life, from a prayer where I said, hey, just take this season. I don't know what's going on. I became a pilot. I became a commercial pilot. I became an instrument rated pilot. I left the music world behind. I started a nonprofit. Just look at all these things that have happened. I started writing a book, and all this is in the last 5 years. Do you think God has nothing for you? And she just started crying. And she says, you have inspired me so much. I'm like, good, because I'm sorry, I didn't want to yell at you. She goes, but yeah, you're right. You're right. I said, God has something for all of us. And the only thing we have to do is lean into God. If we sit there and go, wah, what for me? Why is me? Why is me? We can't ask God why. We never get an answer with why. And that's our first question. But God, show me what you're doing here. Show me what this looks like. And you look through it through the lens of scripture, which is really hard to do. You got to be in the word. And however you're in the word, whether you're listening to sermons all the time, or if you're a reader, and, that's different for every person. But, when you start hearing from God, and God says, just tell my story. And the woman at the intake nurse was just, her mood changed. She was just, you've inspired me so much. Look, you're going to be fine. I'm speaking over you. You're going to be fine right now. And I think we even prayed right then.
Yeah.
So then she took me to the pre-op room, and they start cleaning me up and doing all these things. And, then I get nervous, because then it looks like Kylo Ren's interrogation room. And that's, that operating room. And I'm like, oh my God, what are they going to do? And then I said, you want to hear a story? Do you guys believe in Jesus? So I'm telling the nurses. Then they put me under, and I just went out. I think the last thing I said, do you have any classical music? And they said, yeah, we do. And they said, Alexa, play classical music. And then I just, beautiful Bach. And that's the last thing I remember. And so I woke up and everything's fine. I went home. And I went into the doctor's office to get the results a week later. And the nurse, and I'm nervous, I'm just like, all right, here it is. And the nurse or the doctor is sitting in the chair waiting for me. And she goes, well, Mr. Greenfield, you're going to die one day. And I'm like, she goes, but you're not going to die of this. No leukemia, no cancer. Your bone marrow is fine. You want to hear a story? And it really did. It almost became like a reflex where I was just so excited to tell everybody what God was doing, because here I've been walking with God since 1988, for a
Hmm.
long time. And I've never seen God move like this. And I've always wanted God to move like this in my life. But again, God knits this all together at his timing. And I wouldn't have been able to do this, back 10, 20, or even 5 years ago. But now is the time where all this experience and everything kind of weaves together, where we might not know what to do. And running a nonprofit, I don't know what to do from one day to the next, but I know how to do it through God. I know who to ask, and I know how to pray for it. And that faith, the faith, God told me to up the giving. And when I upped the giving, the money came in for Invisible Angels. And in the book, it's one financial miracle after another. We're looking at a $55,000 maintenance bill. We had $600 in the account, and it came. And
Yeah.
it came like $25 at a time, but it came.
Wow. And now you had an opportunity to tell the story in a book. The book's
Yeah,
called God is in the Fight. God is in
God
the
is in this
Fight.
fight.
And it's available, as they're listening to this, it is available on Amazon, right? Or anywhere
It's
else.
available on Amazon. If you Google "God is in this fight" book, it's on Amazon, Apple, all the book outlets, or you can go to godisinthisfight.com and buy it directly from the publisher. Just go to that website and buy it right from the purchase tab there, and it'll go right to Anika Press,
All
and
right.
you can buy it right there. And there's an audio book as well that you can purchase.
And in what other ways can our listeners support you? Is there some
You know,
opportunities for financial help?
Yes, and yes, absolutely. And here's the thing: we have a $360,000 budget a year, and it literally comes in $25 at a time. Um, the biggest way you can help us is partner with us at any amount. We have so many $5 a month, partners, which is great. $25 a month, is even fantastic. And it's simple math. If 1,000 people donate $25 a month to us, that's $25,000 a month, and that keeps us up and running. And that's the biggest thing you can do, is to partner with us like that. Obviously we're a 501(c)(3). You can go to invisibleangels.org and read everything about us and get all our information. And if you want to contact me, just fill out the contact information at the bottom of the website, and I'll get that immediately.
So what's the next step for Invisible Angels?
So the
Is it going to
next
be
step for Invisible
multiple
Angels.
aircraft? What's going to happen?
Yeah, we do need a bigger aircraft. The aircraft we have right now is wonderful. We're so grateful for it. However, we're getting longer requests to go. There was a request that we had not too long ago, to take somebody from Naples, Florida, with two children, two toddlers, to Boston. And then we got another request to go from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, to Homer, Alaska.
Mm.
So these are 1,500 to 2,500 mile trips. And our aircraft really has a range of about 1,000 miles, but we don't fly with less than an hour and a half of fuel in the fuel tanks, just for safety. So, we can do fuel stops, but really we operate in about an 800-mile range. And, we need something to go a little bit farther and a little bit faster. So the next step up is a TBM 700 or a Pilatus. And, then we're looking at about 3.5 to $4 million. And,
Wow.
our costs go up, but then, we could do so much more in that aircraft as well. And then we can fly multiple people. We just had a request 3 days ago. Was it last Friday, actually, from Homeland Security, for a family reunification. And there were three sets of parents that needed to be reunited with their kids who were abducted into sex trafficking rings, and they're little kids. So but we couldn't take three sets of parents. We didn't have we do have a 6-passenger plane, but we only use the two seats in the middle. We don't want anybody sitting up front with us, because that's a safety concern. And then the two seats in the back, we use those for, baggage and, our aircraft documents. And then it's just, we don't want to pack the airplane. It's uncomfortable when you've got, an airplane full of people. So we just keep it a 2-passenger aircraft. And This trip was for 6 people. So we really have been getting more calls for bigger aircraft, and, God will provide it. He certainly will when the time's right. And that's really what we need. And then we do want to upgrade to 5 aircraft and 5 pilots, because we're a Part 135 carrier, so we can start operating charter flights as well to run, to provide funding for the organization. So there's plenty of people who actually fly privately, and we can offer a competitive rate for that and still have a
Interesting.
profitability in there where it could provide good funding. So, for example, right now we're offering charter flights between Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Fort Lauderdale, and Key West. But if we get a larger aircraft, then we can start offering charter flights to different cities, and use that as a fundraising device. And then also we want to provide transportation for law enforcement and lawyers, where to work on these human trafficking cases where they have to get up to Tallahassee, or there was a case that we had to go for the victim impact statement that we're trying to work out. And so that's the kind of thing we can do, but we need to be able to carry 6 people.
Yeah. Well, we've this has been so fascinating, and so the book was incredible.
Thank you.
You are an inspiration, and I love the interaction you've had with God over multiple decades, and I think that everybody kind of seeks that. Sometimes have a hard time, getting out of their real world life day to day to make time for God to speak. And I think you're the kind of guy that can share that it's worth it for sure to do.
Yeah.
It. So, yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The opportunity for you to tell your story, God's story, right here was great for us and great for our listeners. And I really appreciate it. God bless you, Ted, for doing what you're doing. Hey, that was great. Another amazing guest on Amazing Greats and his God-inspired story. I love how he's built his whole relationship with Jesus and partners with him on just about everything. You can connect with Ted at invisibleangels.org, and get his book, God is in This Fight, now available on Amazon and most booksellers.